Well, TCU survives. It was an ugly game. It was in a snowstorm. They got shut out in the second half, but we don't apologize for wins on Locked On Horned Frogs. They defeat Cincinnati 20-13. We'll break it down next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. TCU is 4-0. Or excuse me, they're 8-4. They're not 4-0. They did go 5-1 in their last 6 games, but they finished the regular season 8-4 after defeating Cincinnati on the road 20-13. Ugly ball game. Frogs got shut out in the second half. They didn't have the ball a lot in the second half. They did milk some clock with Haas Haney in basically a wildcat quarterback formation late in that ball game. He got a couple first downs. Didn't totally salt away the game, but got it down to about a minute. And Ethan Craw had a really nice punt, pinned Cincinnati deep around the 3-yard line. Bearcats couldn't go the length of the field. They actually got into plus territory. They got around TCU's 40-yard line, but Hail Mary falls short. So Frogs survive, Frogs win, and they finish the year at 8-4 and get ready for a bowl game. So we'll talk about the game first that happened today, and then I'll get into some big picture stuff, just where they are now, how they finish the year, and what it means moving forward. But first, let's talk about the football game. Once again, got off to a nice start, which that's been a pleasant surprise in the second half of the season. They did against Oklahoma State and Arizona as well, where they played well at the beginning of the game. Against Arizona, had kind of a lull in the second quarter. Similar situation tonight, but after creating a turnover on special teams, recovering a fumble on a punt, they go down. Savion Williams punches it in from a few yards out. Josh Hoover hit Jack Besh on a 19-yard pass. That was big in getting a first down. They get in the red zone. They score a touchdown to go up 7-0. And really overall, the defense played pretty lights out. I mean, the second half, they gave up a lot of yards. Channing Canada had an interception in the end zone. That was big. Sorsby beat them with his legs a lot tonight. He wasn't super prolific through the air, 21-34, 160 yards, 1 INC, no touchdowns. He had 93 yards rushing, though, and overall, they had 213 on the ground. Corey Kiner had 110 on the ground. But I thought they did a pretty good job against Corey, honestly. Like, he's a good running back. He's got over 1,000 yards this year. He had a 48-yard run in the first half that set up Cincinnati's first touchdown. But other than that, I mean, TCU kind of locked in and played at a high level. They settled for a field goal later on in the first half to go up 10-0. Cincinnati responds and scores a touchdown. And then I think maybe the biggest drive of the game, aside from the last drive with Haas Haney at quarterback, they responded really well. Josh actually hit Blake Newell on a deep pass that got him down the 3-yard line. Savion again punches in the end zone. They score. They go up 17-7. And they were clicking pretty well in the first half offensively. They stalled out in the red zone a few times, so that was a problem. But they tacked on another field goal to go up 20-7 for halftime. And honestly, maybe the biggest drive of the game, or it kind of changed the complexion of the game. They had the ball right before halftime. They got in the red zone, had a false start penalty, had about 8 seconds left. I thought they had time to maybe take one shot at the end zone, but they decided not to do that. They send in Kyle Limmerman. He misses a 38-yarder off the upright. Tough conditions tonight, both for the offense and for the special teams, but just overall a disappointing year for Kyle. I hope he can bounce back next year. I don't know what it's going to look like if they're going to have some sort of competition, but coming in as the number 1 kicker in the nation to only hit 67% of your field goals, that's pretty disappointing. His long this year was 48. I mean, I know he's got a big leg. I know he's got the ability. It's just about that consistency. He missed that kick right before halftime, and they go into the locker room up 20-7, and they just couldn't put it away. The snow started coming down late in the first half. I didn't think Josh played well tonight. I mean, the numbers end up looking okay. He was 18 of 35, 212 yards, threw 1 pick, had no touchdown passes, but those numbers were aided by some long passes. And it's not a super impressive line in itself, but he hit Blake on a long pass. He hit J.P. Richardson on a long pass. Some news from tonight on the injury front. So Jack Bech got hurt, and Steven Johnson from the 4-Star Telegram, he said during halftime that he confirmed that Bech was injured. It was a knee injury. And let me get the exact quote here so I can make sure I get this right and I don't mess anything up. Okay, so this is Steven Johnson. I'm told Jack Bech's injury is a knee injury and there's fear it could be significant, hoping for the best. So that's really unfortunate. I mean, one, it just sucks for him because he's had an incredible season. I think he's really helped his NFL draft stock this year. So I don't know if he's going to play the bowl game or not. It's been a while since TCU's been in a bowl game like this. So I'm really curious to see what it's going to look like. I know my friend Tommy Fisher told me, like, yeah, Savion and Jack, they're definitely sitting out. I would expect that they do that. But this pretty much seals the deal that Jack Bech is not going to play in the bowl game. And I hope he's okay. I mean, the guy has just had an incredible year. They don't get to 8 wins without him. And I think he's a great leader on this team. So it just stinks that he's going down with an injury, and hope the MRI comes back clean and he's okay. But he was out for the entire second half. And Savion Williams, no official word on him, but it looked like he got kind of banged up just throughout the game. He had a carry on 3rd and 1 where he got stopped and didn't get the first down. TCU had to punt. This was in the 4th quarter of the ball game. It was after that Channing Canada interception. And then he came out of the game and he didn't come back. And I assume him not returning means that he was also hurt, or they just said, hey, let's not risk anything here. So if both those guys are injured, I would imagine that takes out any hope of them playing in the bowl game. But one thing that I noticed tonight, and I feel like the weather was a factor too. In the second half of this ball game, it was pretty apparent to me just how much this offense depends on Jack Bech and Savion Williams winning individual matchups. And the problem is, moving forward, those guys aren't going to be playing next year. Now, they have some talented players coming back. I like what Eric McAllister brings to the table. Obviously, Josh Hoover will be back. You've got a lot of the offensive line coming in. So that's significant. But the fact that you're losing those two playmakers, and so much of the turnaround in the second half of the season has revolved around getting them the ball, especially Savion. He's given you some balance on offense. That's not great that you're so dependent on them. And in the second half of this game, late in the 4th quarter, I mean, that last drive. So Cincinnati scores a touchdown to cut it to 20-13. They missed an extra point twice. That was also a big swing moment in this game. Cincinnati scores a touchdown on a zone read by Brendan Sorsby. I didn't love the defense on that play. They kind of gave him the left side of the formation, and he sneaks into the end zone. So it's 20-13. If they make the extra point, it's 20-14, and they could go down and score again and win the ball game. Well, they miss an extra point. Namdi Obizor gets called for offsides, which really rare to get called for offsides on an extra point. And there was a lot of that type of stuff tonight. Like Josh threw an interception. Looked like Drake Dabney was maybe held on the play, but bottom line was he turned it over. They had some silly penalties. Some of the sloppiness that they had kind of gotten out of their system earlier in the year, it felt like it came back this evening. So they had to re-kick, and they were closer. Not that it matters that much because it's still an extra point. And he missed it again. So score stayed 20-13, but TCU gets the ball back with a chance to really salt the game away. And Savion, I guess, wasn't available. So they went to Haas Haney, and they used Haas tonight. He ended up with 8 carries for 48 yards. He was your leading rusher. So in this huge moment where you need to go win the ball game and put together a competent drive, you don't trust your starting quarterback out there, and you don't trust your, I guess, typical offense to run the ball. So, I mean, I love that Haas was available. I love that he answered the call and he did what he was supposed to do. He didn't turn the ball over. He got a couple first downs. He got them into plus territory. Didn't completely finish the drive, but got them in a spot where they could punt the ball pin Cincinnati deep and put them in a tough situation. But in that huge moment in the game, you still don't trust your running backs and your offensive line to go do the job. Like, that's problematic. But that being said, I like what Kendall has done in finding creative ways to work around that. I'm just not sure what's going to happen next season when some of these guys that you've been using to do that are not available. And really, that's kind of the story of not this game, but the entire year. You finish the year strong, which is awesome. But there's a lot of things that you're like, well, you kind of found a way to work around some issues here. What are you going to do next season to sustain it? Let me take a minute to look at some of the things you guys are chiming in on here. John Martin says, I'm ready for, is that some linemen to the transfer portal? I get it. I think they're going to count on some continuity there to get better, but they struggled to block once again. Zoom Play says these other schools escaped. If there were more games, TCU would beat everyone. They're one of the highest teams right now in the league. Yeah, I mean, the UCF game really hurts right now, right? Like, if you take care of business against them, you could be playing in the Big 12 title game right now. If you show up against Houston at home, you could be playing in the Big 12 title game. But to his point, they closed the season really strong, which is good. Kev said the receivers had some drops too. Yeah, offense was just disjointed tonight, especially in the second half. Ben says, I think this is a really good win. We're a pass-heavy team playing against a run-heavy team in the snow. I know it didn't look pretty, but that's still a great win. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about that. Like, they found a way, and it wasn't ideal conditions. I don't love that they're so handicapped in the cold weather, in the snow, but, I mean, they found a way around it. And the defense, I thought, stepped up in a big way because Cincinnati's used to this, and their offense also didn't function well. And I thought Andy Avalos' squad did a really nice job, especially in the second half when they were on the field a lot and their backs were constantly against the wall. Okay, Richard says he thinks John was referring to Limmerman, not lineman. I think you got to give him another year, but I'm frustrated too. I'm frustrated in general with special teams, even though Ethan Craw tonight, the punter, did an outstanding job. I mean, he really saved the game in a lot of ways. Overall, as I said, Sorsby 160 yards passing. They gave up a lot of yards on the ground, but I felt like by and large the defense played well. And they kind of bowed up when they had to in key moments. The interception by Canada. They ended up giving up a lot of yards on that last drive. Bud Clark had a kind of silly ticky-tack interference penalty. They gave up some passes, but they kept everything in front of them. And they sort of got bailed out. It was 1st and 10, and Cincinnati threw a pass that was, I thought initially, I was like, oh, he got a first down at TCU's 40-yard line. They marked him a yard short, and that was huge because they had no timeouts because Cincinnati had to burn a few timeouts earlier in the second half for some like play clock issues and getting the call in type of thing to avoid delay a game. So the clock's running, and suddenly by the time Cincinnati snapped the ball, there were only 8 seconds left. Sorsby throws it away. Now there's 3 seconds left, and then it sets up a chance where the only thing you can do is throw a Hail Mary. So Bud Clark knocks down the pass. They escape and win the game. And, yeah, they give a lot of yards on that drive, but I thought Sonny played that situation well. They kept the ball on the ground. They got a couple first downs. They milked the clock. They took it down to a minute left. What did you guys think about them going for it? Like, they lined up to go for it on 4th and 7 from around the Cincinnati 35-yard line. And I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, you have to punt this ball. Because you're running down the clock till about a minute left in the game. Force them to go the length of the field. Don't bail them out and give them 30 yards. Now, I understand if you kick it in the end zone, you're only netting about 15 yards of field position, but I think the way that game was going, even getting 15 to 20 yards in field position was a big deal. Like, you have to force Cincinnati to go the length of the field, but Ben Taylor Whitfield ends up jumping and getting called for a false start. So they punt, they pin them deep, they escape and win the game. Liam says, will you cover when our players enter the transfer portal? I hear a lot about players coming in, but never players leaving. Yeah, I did that last offseason. I mean, I'll keep tabs on it. I'll talk about it when guys leave. last year, Dominic Williams was the big name. Pretty much everybody else were guys that, I mean, I don't necessarily want anybody to leave, but they were kind of depth players, but we'll talk about that. Kev said Marcus Neal is going to be elite with another defensive tackle next to him. I think so. He was great. He was good again tonight. Somebody mentioned a lot of missed tackles. Yeah, there were. I think footing was an issue, like just being able to stay upright in the snow. Scud James slipped on a pass play that allowed Cincinnati to get a lot of yards down the field on that one touchdown drive they had in the second half. I think the conditions played a big factor. But TCU survived. They won. We'll take a quick timeout here. When we come back, 8-4, what does it mean big picture? We're going to talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Want to give a quick shout out to our friends at FanDuel, FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. Remember, you win one $5 bet, you get $150 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. Okay, so simple question. Joe asked me what my bowl projection is. I think the Texas Bowl, that's what I'm feeling right now. Maybe against LSU, potentially against Vandy. That's my thought. We'll see. It'll be a week. It'll be 8 days until we find out because we'll have conference championship weekend, playoff selection, bowl selection. But that's my vibe right now. Simple question for the chat, though. 8-4. Are you happy or are you not? Are you satisfied? Yes or no? And tell me why. I feel like if I told everybody before the season TCU was going to go 8-4, which was my prediction before the year, it took a winding road to get there, but they got there. At the end of the day, they end up with 8 wins. If I told people that before the season, I think the majority of TCU fans would say, okay, that's a step in the right direction, kind of makes sense given the schedule. You live with that. And I do feel like it's positive that following the rough start, they rallied around their coach. They played well. I thought they had some games where they looked like a complete football team, albeit against bad competition. Their one loss was against a Baylor squad that's been blitzing people lately. Like they destroyed Kansas at home today. They lost a 3-point game. That was a winnable ball game. I don't like losing to rivals, but it wasn't like they got blown off the field. However, I understand the kind of mental pull and tug that's happening with like, okay, we ended up with 8 wins, but thought kind of lucked out with the schedule late in the season. And if they just could have taken care of business during the year, earlier in the year, they could be playing for a conference title right now. Like my buddy Matt Jennings said today, is like, hey, that UCF loss is the most embarrassing now because Gus Malzahn just got fired. They went 4-8. You blew a 21-point lead, all the things. It was horrible. Eric says, not satisfied. The schedule ended up being way too easy to be happy with this record. Even some of the wins like today didn't look good with the talent difference TCU should be benefiting from. Eric Calzada, what's up, buddy? Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I understand not being satisfied. I don't think you should necessarily be satisfied. I guess I'm just kind of resigned to the fact that you're probably running it back next year with the staff. And let me spin it this way. And you guys can tell me if this is dumb, right? Whatever. Marketplace of ideas here on Locked On Horned Frogs. Here's one reason I'm optimistic. I think that they close the season strong. There's some things to build on, but there's still a lot of pressure on this coaching staff going into next year. I don't get the impression that Jeremiah Donati and the boosters are like, hey, Sonny just bought himself an extension, right? So there should be a lot of motivation and encouragement of like, hey, nice job salvaging this thing, but next season's put up or shut up time. And I don't know if that gives fans a lot of hope, but I think that's a good sign for the future of this program that that the fan base and hopefully the administration is not sitting here like, well, hey, we won 8 games. What are you going to do? And there's not a desire to do more. Kev says, I like how the season ended, but I'm not satisfied because I believe we lost some games we should have won. I mean, that sums up pretty well. And the losses were frustrating because it was preventable. And a lot of it seemed like coaching malpractice. Frog fans says I was ready for an 8-4 record, but not the way we did it. Should be 10-1. The only game we should have lost was the SMU. And I mean, yeah, that was the only game where you got blown out, right? Like that was the only ball game where you just weren't in it. I mean, Houston kind of, but they were still within striking distance, even with all the issues. Ben says he completely forgot we lost a running backs coach. That loss looks big now. Yes, they did. They did lose the running backs coach, and they lost him late in the process. They brought in Jimmy Smith from Arkansas. I think we were all disappointed in the way the running backs played. I feel like the offensive line has to get better, but at the same time, like once Savion kind of took over in the run game, you saw that, okay, if you have a big back who can break tackles and make things happen, then there's opportunity here. They're not just getting whipped every single play. Somebody asked me if I thought they'd fire the O-line coach, A.J. Ricker. It's a great question. I think they'd be totally within their rights to do it. This offensive line has been a mess the last 2 years. I feel like they were much better protecting Josh this year in the passing game. But the running game's still an issue. And I will say, on the running back spot, in limited carries, I thought Cam Cook looked good in the last few weeks. He looked more decisive to me, and he just looked like somebody who was more explosive and more ready to play Power 4 football. So maybe that's something you can build on. I think Jeremy Payne looked good in limited action. It was kind of a weird chicken and the egg thing because, I mean, I think they had to go to the Savion package because they had so many issues. But then it was like later on in the year, it felt like the running backs had some more confidence and they were more effective running the ball, but they just didn't get a lot of opportunities. Like tonight, I mean, Cam had 6 carries for 26 yards. Trent Battle, 4 for 17. Jeremy Payne, 4 for 14. And nobody's able to really get in a rhythm. Joe says he went more north and south. Yeah, that's what I saw. And Eric says he wished he saw more Jeremy Payne. Me too. I thought the Baylor game might have been his best game outside of the Kansas game, but it was like he would put on a good performance, and then they don't find a way to get him more involved. I just always thought that was weird. I assume we're going to see some more of Haas Haney in the bowl game, so that'll be interesting. Liam asks, you think the thought process behind taking Josh out of the game was really a trust issue? I think a big plus was getting Haas some snaps and developing him more. Maybe trust issue is the wrong way to put it. I guess it was just kind of the way the game was going. They had to run the ball there. Savion didn't look like he was available. And Josh is not a guy who's going to get downhill and run the ball. So they said, hey, get out there, Haas. It was just weird to me as he was taking the field. I'm thinking, man, this is crunch time. In a game that ultimately, I mean, the only difference is whether you finish 7-5 or 8-4. And I do think that matters. But we're not talking about like playing for a Big 12 championship here. Still, biggest moment of the ball game, you're throwing a true freshman QB out there. I think he handled it well. And I understand it was a situational thing. And it was probably just a game script type of deal. And what I mean by that is like, you can't really throw the ball right now. One, because you're trying to milk the clock. Secondly, because the snow and the conditions. So let's just not make it a secret to anybody. And let's give Cincinnati a different look with a ball carrier that they've seen some, but not a lot of. And it worked. I mean, to their credit, it basically did the entire job. You know, it milked most of the clock, gave the defense a chance to get down there, get off the field and win the game, which they did. So, hey, finish 8-4. I'll have plenty of coverage of this. We'll have the show on Monday. We'll cover signing day on Wednesday. Thank you guys for rocking with me in the post-game show. It's Locked On Horned Frogs. It's your team. We do it here every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. There's the outro. Sorry, been a long week, everybody.